Hello, my name is Andrea Nottestead. I am a senior product manager with Orbis Corporation. I've been with Orbis for 26 years, and in the last 10 years or so of that time, I've been very focused on the movement of goods through the retail supply chain, ultimately ending up with consumers, whether that be via retail store environment or through the e-commerce channels. In the next 10 minutes, we're going to cover some of the considerations we see our customers grappling with and how that may overlap with packaging considerations as designing new solutions. On Thursday at 2:30, I have a reusable packaging in e-commerce DCs session where I'll go into more detail on very specific product forms and features that are commonly used within a DC e-commerce environment. So this session is about optimizing store and warehouse operations. There's a lot of statistics out there around e-commerce and omni-channel specifically. And even more recently with the impact from COVID, a lot of people are saying that the pace at which e-commerce is being adopted and implemented within operations has been moved up, whether that be 4 to 6 years. And when I think of that quote in the upper right-hand corner of operationalizing, omnichannel is at its core an exercise in change management. I feel like that summarizes it perfectly because the pace at which change is happening, and I think is going to continue to happen, is what is really creating an opportunity for customers as they design new solutions and integrate them into their existing operations. This presentation is touching on both in retail and in DC, but from our perspective, that's very broad because as we'll touch on the next slide, there is differences. While there's some common elements, how they are executed really can differ. And so that can create new solutions coming into the marketplace. So some of the common characteristics we hear being talked about is that obviously there is a speed to get going. This is happening fast, as we mentioned it with COVID, has accelerated that. And so our customers feel that pressure to get going and to increase their throughput in this area. As always, regardless of whether you are fulfilling in store or in a distribution center, that associate interface is critical. And as time becomes more of an element and throughput becomes more of an emphasis, how that work is being completed for the associate becomes more critical. There are space constraints, and I'll touch on that one a little bit later, although they differ between the environments. And then obviously, as you talk about time and throughput, just that pressures for continuous improvement. When I say pressures for more efficiency, to me, that's the heart of a mindset of continuous improvement. So while those are shared elements, some of the ways that those can differ though within a DC versus a store is, for example, in a DC, there's typically a lot more infrastructure already existing. And so how your new solutions interface with that, whether it be carts, racking systems, conveyor belts, transition areas, that becomes can become a constraint that people are needing to work within. And obviously within that environment, the sheer throughput and oftentimes balancing that throughput between multi-nodes, meaning also in an environment you may be going direct to consumer, but you're very likely also still the majority going direct to a retail environment. When you look at that inclusion of e-commerce fulfillment within a store, which is really that BOPIS model of buy online, pick up in store. Now you take that extreme space limitations. You are seeing retailers actually allocating in some instances floor space to picking operations on stores. You have the added element of actually picking and fulfilling orders in a consumer environment. And so considerations for the packaging solutions we see are, line of sight, ease of maneuverability, limited concerns about a consumer maybe backing into something and being injured. All of those come into consideration. And then when you take it car side, you have the elements of the outdoors, weather variations, just the sidewalks and maneuverability. And then, having something next to someone's car, you don't want damage on that. So those are where some of the elements might differ, but at the root, they do have a lot of commonality. Going a little deeper on the DC side and some of the things we've seen kind of evolve in the last few years is that if you look at this continuum from left to right, it is more about, on the left is more that environment of using existing assets and resources to get going and get it and engage. So in that case, you could be using your stores to fulfill. You could be using your to retail environment to fulfill and allocating a section of it to start addressing the e-commerce needs. But as you go further to the right, you're maybe moving more to specialized spaces. And each of those have different elements that it brings for our customers. What we see is when you're on the further left side of this continuum, we're seeing the desire for more manual solutions, things that are very scalable. We see more mobility, meaning, people are allocating maybe space. And so the use of secondary equipment may be less desirable for something that has wheels, something that their associates can personally maneuver themselves. And that speed to get going is very paramount. When you go to the right side, and many times this is really described by the inclusion of more automation. And automation is broad. It can be the inclusion of just starting to pick to belt versus pick to cart, all the way up to the installation of ASRS systems. But even, pick to light versus pick to voice, those are all steps on that evolution. And what we see from a packaging perspective is that that need of balancing between those, and even if you're on the left side, introducing solutions, introducing standards that then help you transition to the right side, and keeping that in mind becomes something that we work very strongly with our customers when they're still in the early stages of implementation. So if we have 4 suggestions for helping balance in this area, following would be our 4 suggestions. 1 would be balance the specific need with the big picture need. Look for multi-purpose assets. Consider asset storage options that allow you to address the fluctuations within the business. And finally, get going. So let's still drill down a little bit how that may look and some of the questions that may come up when you're looking at designing solutions and integrating that from a returnable packaging perspective. So balance specific needs with big pictures. Many times we'll have conversations with customers and their immediate challenges. I need to have something to pick the orders into. And maybe a near-term challenge is that we've already started picking into this cart. We want it to integrate perfectly with that cart, and that becomes the fixed solution. Some ways that we are encouraging our customers is just take a moment, and still moving fast. Take a moment though, is that, where could you be going, with the projections of growth? Where could that be different? Today, you may be picking to cart, but could you be picking to belt or other automation in the future? Is that in scope for you? Today, what is the flow? Are you in an environment that's completely static, where the entire picking process, meaning the goods being picked as well as that movement of goods, is all contained within a single facility? Or is there the potential for that product to flow between? You have certain SKUs in certain locations, and you try to consolidate those closest to the customer. That introduces more movements and more touches. And that comes into play because then some of the solutions you want to look at, you don't want to optimize in one area and completely negatively impact the optimization in, for example, on a truck. It might optimize on a cart, a tote, but then you try to palletize it and put on the truck, and it's very sub-optimized. Multi-purpose assets. Some examples listed here is, as we already talked, maybe a tote, instead of picking into a single-use type of container onto a pick cart, establishing your unit of picking on the front end into a pick cart, so that if today you're picking to cart, but your vision is to go to a belt, the ability for that same unit of picking can transition seamlessly from cart to belt. As we mentioned, maybe there's still aisle picking off of a pallet, but you start to see a need for addressing slower moving or smaller SKU items. So maybe a product that you can pick from a pallet, but you could also column stack it and pick now multiple SKUs out of a single column. We talked about something that works in DC but transfers to truck, as well as in stores. We're really focused on lots of solutions that allow you to do multiple activities. For example, a base that allows you to pick onto the same base that you would store the order on, stage the order on, and ultimately using that base to deliver car side. The fluctuation of orders is critical, and so that need to condense and things that can be set aside and not consume as much space in the lower volume times becomes critical, because in most all these environments, space is paramount. Also, structures that allow you to go vertical, so that when you're in a small space, not just consuming the linear space, but also going vertical. And then last, something that we've heard from a number of customers is this concept of, I'd rather be 60% right and go fast than go slow to be 85% right. And to me, that is the element of where continuous improvement is coming from within this. And that idea of instilling some basic standards on the front end will allow you to go faster in the long term. So with this, I am done on this portion, and I want to go into some of the questions and answer anything that you may have at this point.